2026 Brewers spring breakout facing the Mariners. They win 7-3. Will Childers with the win. Cade Anderson with the loss. Top of the first, Johnny Farmelo would lead it off with a single. Michael Arroyo and Cole Emerson would hit into back-to-back outs. An RBI single by Lazaro Montes would make it 1-0 Mariners. Felton and Celestin would strike out to end out the inning. Bottom of the first, Ryan Sloan would throw a 1-2-3. Top of the second would start off with a Luke Stevenson flyout. Luis Suspil would hit a single, and then Yorger Bautista would get walked. Brian Fitzpatrick would enter the game for the Brewers. He'd walk Corbin Dickerson, and then Johnny Farmelo would ground into a double play to end out the inning. Bottom of the second, Ryan Sloan would throw another 1-2-3. Top of the third, Bryce Mekich would enter the game for the Brewers. He'd start by getting back-to-back outs to Michael Arroyo and Cole Emerson. Lazaro Montes would hit a single, then get a stolen base. Felton and Celestin would get walked, and then Luke Stevenson would be out number 3 on a flyout. Bottom of the third, Ryan Sloan would throw his third 1-2-3. Top of the fourth, Luis Suspil would be the first out on a ground out. Yorger Bautista would hit a triple, and then Corbin Dickerson would hit into a fielder's choice. And then Johnny Farmelo would be out number 3 on a strikeout. Bottom of the fourth, Cade Anderson would enter the game for the Mariners. He'd start by giving up a double to Jet Williams, and then an RBI single by Jesus Mate would tie it up at 1. Luis PEÑA would be out number 1 on a lineout. Cooper Pratt would hit a single, then he'd be caught stealing. Jefferson Carroll would strike out to end out the inning. Top of the fifth, Michael Arroyo would start off with a single. Cole Emerson would be out number 1, and then an RBI single by Lazaro Montes would make it 2-1 Mariners. Felton and Celestin would ground into a double play to end out the inning. Bottom of the fifth, Luis Lara would start off the walk. Josh Adamczewski would strike out. Brock Wilken would then get walked, and then Braylon Payne would ground into a double play to end out the inning. Top of the sixth, Will Childers would enter the game for the Brewers, and he would throw a 1-2-3. Bottom of the sixth, Jet Williams and Jesus Mate would get on by back-to-back walks. And then Luis PEÑA would hit a 3-run shot, making it 4-2 at 104.7 miles an hour. Apparently, they don't have the distances on here, which I don't get, but it's whatever. Luis PEÑA with a 3-run shot, which makes the go-ahead runs. After that, Cooper Pratt would reach on a fielding error. Charlie Bylinson would enter the game for the Mariners. He'd start by striking out Jefferson Carroll, and then Luis Lara and Josh Adamczewski would hit back-to-back singles. Brock Wilken would be out number 2, and then a bases-loaded walk to Braylon Payne would make it 5-2. Casey Hintz would enter the game for the Mariners, and you get the final of the inning to Jet Williams. Top of the seventh, Jaron DeBerry would enter the game for the Brewers. He'd start by giving up a single to Aiden Torek. Carlos Mendes would run into a double play, and then Leandro Romero would strike out to end out the inning. Bottom of the seventh, Mason Peters would enter the game for the Mariners. He'd start by getting the first 2 outs to Daniel Dickinson and Luis PEÑA. Brady Elbow will be hit by a pitch, and then back-to-back walks by Darian Miller and Josiah Ragsdale will get them on base. And then Josh Adamczewski would strike out to end out the inning. Top of the eighth, Austin St. Laurent and Jared Sundstrom would hit into back-to-back outs. Nick Becker would hit a single, and then Josh Caron would strike out to end out the inning. Bottom of the eighth, Eric Batanti would lead it off with a double. Jose Anderson would strike out for out number 1. Then an RBI double by Andrew Fisher would make it 6-2. And then another RBI double, this time by Daniel Dickinson, would make it 7-2. Tyler Cleveland would enter the game for the Mariners. He'd start by hitting Marco Dingus. Daniel Dickinson would be caught stealing, and then Brady Elbow would strike out to end out the inning. Top of the ninth, Ryan Bircher would enter the game for the Brewers, and he'd get the first out to Charlie Pagliarini. And then Yorger Bautista would just absolutely belt this ball off of Ryan Bircher. This ball probably hasn't even actually landed yet. It was probably just AI generated if it actually landed. Anyways, it was hit 109.1 off the bat. That's a lot of speed for, just a prospect. And that would make it 7-3. Aiden Torek and Carlos Mendes would get back-to-back outs to end out the game. Alright, so the Brewers prospects in their spring breakout game win 7-3. And the Brewers' respective hitter of the game goes to Luis PEÑA. The pitcher of the game goes to Jaron DeBerry.